Good afternoon, everybody. We're so excited to have you all joining us for Dress Like a Work of Art, a part of our Community Day Art Extravaganza. Today is a day that's totally devoted to art and the unconventional and wonderful ways that we create art together. And this morning we were joined by the Children's Museum of Manhattan, where we made edible portraits with a pancake artist over at Dan Cakes. If you missed those events, go ahead and head over to our Facebook page and check them out. Let us know if you are interested in seeing more from us in all kinds of ways, and if you've been participating this morning, and also put in the chat where you're from today. We'd love to hear from you. My name is Hannah. I'm the individual giving manager at the New York Museum of Art, and I'm very excited to be joined today for our program by artist Ariel Adkins, who believes that the best way to appreciate art is to do it yourself. Ariel has created over 60 one-of-a-kind pieces of clothing that recreate artwork in a wearable form. Some of her colorful one-of-a-kind creations include a jumpsuit of Claude Monet's Waterlilies and Hilma af Klint's The 10 Largest as a skirt. Welcome, Ariel. We are so excited to hear about your practice today. As we hear from her, if you have any questions, please do feel free to type them below in the chat. And go ahead, take it away, Ariel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. I am so beyond thrilled to be a part of the art extravaganza today. There has been so much inspiration already happening through this program, and I'm just really honored to be just one of the amazing people that is participating. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope you learn a little bit about what I do today. So I just want to start out by telling you a bit about where I came from and my background as far as my art is concerned. So both of my parents were artists in their own ways. They were very creative people, always kind of doing lots of different things, very hands-on. They always encouraged me to think outside the box. And whenever there was something that I wanted to buy, they encouraged me to make it, which I hated as a kid. But, now I think that that is a big part of why I am so into designing my own clothing, because they really instilled the desire to have something unique and special and handmade throughout my childhood. So as you can see here, this is a little picture of me. I kind of still appreciate the same color palette that I did when I was 3. So some things never change. But over the years, my work has progressed from simple paintings to wearable garments. So just a little bit of the history of how I went from painting to wearable art. I ended up going to undergrad for painting, which was a natural progression from what I loved doing as a child. And shortly after I graduated, my mom passed away. And she was a huge influence on my life and creativity, and honestly, the reason why I wanted to become an artist. And after I graduated and lost my mom, I had a really hard time figuring out sort of just my path in the world. What does art mean to me? How do I have a career in art? And also kind of maneuvering through the grief of her loss. It was a really tough time. And I can happily say that my art is the one thing that got me through. My mom was such an influence, not only on my artistic eye, but also on my fashion. And that is how Artfully Aware actually came to be. So after she passed away, I started looking for a way to memorialize her through my art. And I started putting together outfits inspired by some of my mom's favorite artworks. And eventually, I started making my own. So there's the backstory of how this all began. And it's been going for just about a decade now, which feels like a really long time. But at the same time, I truly feel like I have so much more to do. So here are just a few of my earlier works. Now, aside from making my own garments in that progression, I sort of started out on the side of embodying art. I really wanted to become a work of art. It wasn't just about what I was wearing, but I wanted to look like and to envelop myself in the work. This is a really fun piece that I did at the Mauritius Museum in the Netherlands. And of course, this is Girl with the Pearl Earring. And it was so funny because on the day that I visited the museum, it was really a pilgrimage for me. This was an artwork that I loved for such a long time, and I was finally going to see it. So, I brought the clothing, but I was nervous about wearing it in the museum. It was sort of the first time that I had done something like this. So I got into the room where the painting was, and I was like kind of freaking out, like, oh my gosh, there she is. It's the painting, it's finally the thing that I've wanted to see. And so I put on the jacket and I started like wrapping the scarf around my head and like putting the scarf on the back. And then I was putting on the earrings, and I heard someone across the gallery say, oh my gosh, she's becoming the work of art. And it was such a funny moment because I was like, you know what? That is what I'm doing. That is what I want to do. And that is the goal behind my artwork. So that was just a moment where things sort of clicked for me, and that in the sense of becoming a work of art, there were so many different things that I could do and explore with this type of work. So here's another piece where I'm just blending in this hand painted dress into a recreation of Vincent van Gogh's bedroom. And this is sort of when I started exploring with, well, what about, how do I engage with the environment, and not just an artwork in a frame, but like, what if I'm a part of the space and a part of the actual installation? And so then through that type of work, I started working with museums. And this is one of my very favorite pieces that I did in collaboration with the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And I brought this one outside today so you can see it there behind me. But this is a hand-painted skirt inspired by Hilma af Klint's The 10 Largest. And how this project came to be was that I was doing this work with sort of blending into the environments in these hand-painted clothes. And the Guggenheim approached me and they said, we're opening this exhibition of Hilma af Klint's work. What would you want to do? Is there a piece that you like? Would you want to make a wearable? And so I looked through the whole exhibition, and these works just really spoke to me because they really are over human scale. Like the way that you can participate and sort of feel enveloped in these works felt so special to me. So I was initially drawn to them, but then I started reading more about the artist Hilma af Klint and about the time in which she lived. And I started exploring what type of silhouettes of clothing she would have worn. And that's how I ended up painting this, what I think is a really special full skirt, because it's what she would have worn at the time. This was a special piece for me because she is an example of an artist who became known in a time when a lot of female artists weren't really a part of the art world. And she's, really been rediscovered in the past few years. And I think she has such a special story that the piece is really special to me now. So all of this work that I had done up until this point was really centered around me, which is, that happens. I'm always available. I'm kind of always in my studio. I'm always thinking about what I'm going to be doing next. But I really wanted to explore some ways to bring other people into my art and to have other folks wearing Artfully Aware pieces. So this is a project that I did at the Artist Project in Toronto. And I actually sourced models from the local community who wanted to participate and be painted live. So I worked with Mike Smalley, an artist who's also based there in Toronto in Canada, and he exhibited his work, and then I painted these women inspired by the work that was there. So it was a fun process for me because typically I can spend anywhere from 4 to 12 hours on a piece, but this was something that I was doing live in the moment. So it had to be super quick, really get the point across in a fast way, but capture the elements of that piece that really stand out. And so not only was it a fun challenge for me, but what I really, really loved the most about this was getting to know the women who were the models and talking to them while I was painting them. And I actually learned that the young woman on the right is a UPS delivery person. And, she has a job that she does during the day, but that she always wanted to be an artist and a designer. And she hadn't had that opportunity yet in her career. She was thinking about going back to school. And she said that the process of being able to wear this wearable art and have this experience encouraged her to think about her next steps in her career and how she could be more creative in her life. And that was just such a moment of connection for me when I felt that my work is meaningless unless it can inspire others. And so then I started thinking about what else I can do to encourage other people to kind of explore their own wearable art and see art in a different way by becoming the art. And these are just a few examples that I absolutely love of folks from the Artfully Aware online community sharing their own wearable art pieces. I just, these kind of photos are what makes me feel like what I do is worthwhile. So I wanted you to see them. And these are also folks that I've gotten to meet in person and have amazing connections with. So just remembering that there's more to art than a personal experience, but community is such an important element. For any artist to feel like their work connects with the world is an amazing thing. So now we're up until just about a year ago, at the beginning of the pandemic. And I know so many artists and creatives alike have had to reckon with how their work existed in, sort of a different environment, different access, what it was like to be at home and still find inspiration. And last March, during a moment of real anxiety that I was experiencing, just uncertainty about the state of the world and everything that was going on, feeling like I was not connected to the community, like I said, had been so important to me and to my work, and wanting a way to sort of reach out and bridge the gap between that. And I saw this hashtag that was going around on social media saying everything will be okay. And I thought, maybe I can just create something super simple that I can wear that will remind me of that message. And as you probably noticed, my clothes are really important to me and they often reflect my mood. And so the thought of wearing something with a positive reinforcing message was just kind of a natural progression for me. So I created this jacket and I shared it out on my Instagram, and people really connected with it. They asked if they could buy the jacket. They asked if I would make a print of it. Could I create a coloring book page of it? And there was this just outpouring of need for people to feel the positivity of this message for themselves. So I did my first community art project, which was obviously completely virtual. But I basically created a downloadable print and a t-shirt that people could buy, and they could paint and decorated them themselves to actually share this message with their family, with their loved ones, children, parents, people all over the world could actually be a part of this. And all of the proceeds that came out of this project, I donated to Feeding America for COVID relief meals, which felt like a way that it was one of the first times I really used the financial side of my work to give back to the community. I love connecting with the community through art, but using my work to raise money for a cause was a really special thing for me. So I really enjoyed that project. And this is, oh, I guess that wasn't the video. Sorry, I have a video there. I'll share it on my Instagram and you can see it later. So after the Everything Will Be Okay project, things really weren't getting that much better. I was okay. Thankfully, my family was okay. We were all fine, but there was a lot happening in the world. And in June, of course, there were massive racial uprisings that I felt so passionate about, that it was such an important cause for Black Lives Matter. And I didn't know how to make a statement through my art. I felt like, what is the right way for me to talk about this as an artist? I want to share messages of positivity, but it felt like I just couldn't really break through with the right thing at the right time in that moment. But, donating money, I was doing these things, I was going to protests, things like that. But I wanted to use my art to really spread that message. So one Saturday, I went to a Black-owned business in Flatbush and bought a ton of blank t-shirts. I hauled them into Union Square in Manhattan and set up a table with all of my art supplies. And I hand cut stencils with the Black Lives Matter fist on them. And I taught people in the streets how to make their own wearable protest art. Now, this was a really important moment for me because I hadn't really interacted in person with very many people in those few months leading up to this. And I felt that it was so important. This isn't something that I wanted to post online for people to download. I felt that it was important for me to engage and to show my support for this cause by physically creating work with people. And I'll just tell you a brief story about the gentleman on the right. He was at the protest and I had my table set up and I was showing people how to create, these t-shirts with a fist or with, words that they could choose the letters and different things like that. And this gentleman was sort of standing off to the side. And I could see that he was like kind of interested. He was looking, but he wasn't approaching. And so I sort of waved to him and I said, sir, would you be interested in making a t-shirt? I can help you. I can show you how to do it. And so he came up and he said, well, you know, I haven't painted since I was in second grade. And I said, you know what? I think you and a lot of people probably haven't done this in a long time. But I said, you know, I really encourage you to try it. It's okay if you mess up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's about how important this message is. And he said, you know, this is an important message, so I want to do it. So I helped him create the t-shirt that you see him holding here. And he was really nervous, but he really kind of got into it. Like he was there for maybe 30 minutes working on this and really perfecting it and filling in all the lines with the white paint. And at the end, he said to me, thank you so much for encouraging me to do this. I have been carrying so much weight from everything happening in the world and from this cause and the horrible things that are happening in my community. And for a few moments while I was painting this shirt, I kind of forgot about all of that. And that was such a special thing for me to hear coming from him, because it was a heavy time. You know, there was a lot happening, and there still is. Every day we wake up in a world where, you know, it feels like the news is a crazy cycle, but sometimes you can really let go and release through creating. And this was a time when I got to share that with someone else. So I was really proud of that. I think it's probably one of my proudest moments as an artist, was really being able to connect with people through this cause and supporting it through my artwork. And so here is a very recent piece. This is a special one. As I mentioned, I have been really interested in bringing other people into the world of Artfully Aware through having them wear the art, and not just me, and not just, you know, something on social media, but bringing it to life with other people embodying the work. This is a friend of mine named Chet Gold. He is a security officer at the Museum of Modern Art. And I actually met him at the museum a little over a year ago. So before COVID and everything, I met him and I found out that he's a poet. And so he is a guard at the museum, but he has a extremely rich creative practice of his own with his poetry and music. And so I started following him and just found him so inspiring. And I loved the dichotomy of, you know, him having this day job within an art space, but also creating his own art outside of the office. So we kept in touch, and once things started opening up again in New York and museums started opening, I mentioned to him that I would love to create a piece of wearable art for him, and if he could let me know what was his favorite piece in the Museum of Modern Art. So without even a beat, he said, it's definitely Claude Monet's Waterlilies. This is my ultimate piece. It gives me so much joy and peace and comfort every time I'm in the space. I've been inspired by it so many times. So of course that had to be the piece that he was going to wear. So he chose a garment, which was a jumpsuit, and I painted it for him. And we actually did a photo shoot in the museum with Chet, and a video of him walking through the space wearing his artwork and also looking at his favorite artwork. So this was a really special moment when I was able to shine a light on someone who I am so inspired by having him wear something that inspired him. And it was really a full circle moment. So another thing that I've been working on this past year, without the access to be able to enter so many museums and art spaces like I typically do, I've really been looking to nature more for inspiration. And I brought some of my nature pieces out here today as well. You can see the tulip dress that I'm wearing in this picture is right here. And so it was really special for me to think about how to translate the process of my work into an outdoor changing environment. And that's kind of why I wanted to be outside today to talk to you, because it's been such a journey for me to feel comfortable doing my work outside with changing light and color and temperature and people walking by and asking questions and, you know, figuring out how my work translates into a natural setting. So here are a couple of my pieces that I've done this past year, one in the fall and then one in the summer at the beach. And this has been something that I've been getting a lot of joy out of during the time of lockdown, but also just a renewed inspiration for me as I move forward and progress in my work. I recently finished my first creative residency, which was a wonderful experience for me to spend some time totally focused on my artwork in a space different from my home. And throughout that process, I was thinking about my work in nature, and I was doing a lot of sketches outdoors with watercolors. Here you can see there's a sketch of a conch shell. You might be able to see it a little bit, and some coral. And I started thinking about how can I use my nature sketches to inspire some of my wearable art. So what I ended up doing was I cut out miniature viewfinders of some of the clothing that I wanted to paint. And you can actually see I'm wearing the dress here that is in this cutout here. And I used that to choose the composition out of my sketches. And then I painted that composition onto my clothing. And I did my first capsule collection. I completed this in 1 week. And this was the culmination of the nature inspired work that I've been doing, because not only was it all created in an outdoor setting, it was also abstracted from nature. It wasn't a, exact visual of a tulip. It was completely blown up and moving from direct view into abstraction. And so this was something that I'd been wanting to do with my work for a long time. And I finally had this breakthrough just a few weeks ago. So this is where I'm at right now at this moment. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about what I've been up to, and I'll hand it back to Hannah.
Thank you so much. It's really amazing to see how you are really using the power of art and creativity to inspire yourself, but also inspire those around you. And I think that's a really important story for us all to hear, especially this year. So thank you so much for sharing. All of the pieces behind you are so gorgeous, and there's been a lot of people noting them in the chat, especially noting your tulip dress. And I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more information about them, or maybe a closer look at what we're seeing.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. So yeah, behind me, you can see some of my hand painted pieces, and I'll just do a little walkthrough so you can kind of hear about them. And a few of them I did already talk about. So here you can see the tulip dress that I showed in a picture in the tulip field. This is one of the pieces from my recent collection that I completed during my residency. This is a snow inspired piece that I actually painted outside during the winter. And that was an interesting experience to paint out of doors when it was about 30 degrees. So it was a good challenge.
Wow, definitely.
This is the Hilma of Klint skirt that I also showed in the presentation. We'll see if you can see a little bit closer here. You can see all the brush strokes. And I mentioned that my work typically takes between 4 and 12 hours, but I think this piece, I spent a total of about 30 hours on it. So it's definitely one that I prize very highly.
Definitely. And we're going to have some time for a more formal Q&A after we take a peek at these pieces, but there's a few questions about like what kind of paint you use and how you paint them. Would you mind just sharing, as you're showing us the pieces behind you, a little bit about your process of creation?
Absolutely. So I think you can see here, I'll just like turn this a little bit, but the tulip dress, this is one way that I paint the clothes. I actually put them flat onto my drawing board on an easel, and then I paint one side first, and then I flip it over and paint the other side. I mix my own paints. So these are just regular, just typical paint brushes. These are horsehair, but you can use any type of brushes. And then to create fabric paint, you just mix acrylic paint with a textile medium. There are a few different brands that make it, but Golden is my favorite. And it makes it so that your paint will be permanent on clothing, and then you can wash it again and again, and you don't have to worry about it running or anything like that. So like I said, I mix my own colors, and I tend to name the colors as well. So I have like funny names for all of them, but that's just sort of a bit about the process. You can also use, fabric paint that you find at the store. Different art supply stores will sell it. All of them are great. I think I've pretty much tried all of the different brands, and they all work quite well. Here's another example with just a bit of a different process. So this dress I actually created using block prints that I carved. I don't know if any of you have ever tried that process, but you basically use carving tools to create a stamp, and then you dip it in paint and you block print it. So there are so many different techniques that you can use to create your wearable art.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
There's a question of whether you make your own clothing or whether you buy it and then paint on it.
So typically I buy the clothing and then paint it. I think of all my clothing blanks as my canvases, and I've learned that 100% cotton or linen is the most fun to paint on, but you can kind of paint on most different fabrics. I've painted on leather, faux leather, canvas, silk even, and it's kind of fun to experiment with like different ways of painting that are with different fabrics. Things sort of like turn out differently each time. So if you want to try it, I definitely recommend starting with cotton though.
Oh, fantastic. Can I ask to see a close-up of the Yayoi Kusama dress that you have back there? It's one of my favorite artists, and I'm sure some people on the chat are familiar with her work as well, and so vibrant with that bright yellow.
Yes, this one was a labor of love as well. You can see all these tiny little polka dots. And one thing I want to mention is that through creating some of these pieces that are inspired by other artists' works, it really made me appreciate their work so much.
I'm sure it
Because
did.
I know how much work goes into it. And this was just, one simple painting, but to think about Kusama in the way that repetition is really a part of her work and a part of her practice, I felt like doing this dress really made me understand that in a more meaningful way. So now when I see her work, I'm like, okay, I really appreciate how much time went into that.
Completely. And Megan is actually asking how you created those circles so perfectly. Did you use a stencil or are you just a brilliant freehander?
To be honest, they're mostly freehand. The big ones I used a stencil, and then the smaller ones that went out from there, I just freehanded it. So it took a while.
Wow, that is really fantastic. So I would love to just open up to Q&A now, if that's okay with you. I think we have a couple kind of really interesting questions to share.
Great.
Awesome. So one of them is we love how you're using art as a way to share your voice for activism, for self-expression. When you got started, did you think of your art as a way to share your voice? Did you always express yourself with your clothes? How did that idea sort of get started in your practice?
Thank you so much for that question. I did not think of my art as a way to share my voice or to be an activist or to make a statement. As I mentioned at the beginning, my work started as a way to memorialize my mom, which is a very personal thing. And I am really excited by the way it has really expanded from that. I feel like through my art, my voice has gotten louder. And I've always been sort of a shy person and with not a lot of desire to be on the center stage or anything like that. But through wearable art, I really was able to gain confidence. And of course, painting in front of other people, naturally, you're going to talk to them and discuss with them. And I love that my work has forced me to become more comfortable with that. So in my hopes and dreams, my work continues to move more in that direction. I love most of my favorite artists have an element of activism to their work. And so I would love to continue in that vein and find more ways to support causes that are important to me through my work.
That's fantastic. And another question that we had too is about this kind of conversation you're having with the pieces that you're both kind of riffing off of and in some ways translating onto fabric, onto clothing. And I think your style seems to be something that is accessible to some people that maybe, like you're saying, wouldn't think of themselves as being particularly open with their conversation, who still want to take part in this kind of situation and conversation, but maybe are a little bit hesitant to use their voice. Do you think that this is a good medium for young artists to sort of express themselves?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really interesting question because it is sort of a gateway. I think that not everyone, even for me, like if I stare at a big canvas, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I start? Like, what is the beginning? How do I get into this? How do I channel my inspiration into something? And wearable art was really kind of a safe space for me in a way. I don't know why it felt less overwhelming than, okay, I'm a fine artist, like that, it's scary. It's a lot. I mentioned that I had a hard time transitioning from my schooling into my career. So yeah, I would say that wearable art is a great place to start. You can also feel a little bit less overwhelmed with materials because, like I said, you kind of are using fabric paint or fabric medium. So it's not as open ended. But really, the possibilities are still endless. I mean, you can do so many things. And the other thing that I wanted to mention also is how you can really give new life to old things, which, I'm a big sustainability person, and being able to use, I mean, a lot of my clothing that I find, comes from secondhand stores or even is something older of mine that I've repurposed. I love that part of things. And I'm just going to put this out there in the universe, but I would love to paint someone's old wedding dress. So
Oh,
that's
that's
been a goal of
fantastic.
mine. So if anyone on the call has something lying around, let me know.
Oh my goodness. There's a question somewhat related to, is there a medium or process that you have not tried that you would like to? That's from Nat.
Oh, there are so many. Yes. So I do want to explore creating the garments themselves. I've been sketching some things that I think would be kind of ideal garments to paint on. As I mentioned, I am a painter, and so I always kind of want to keep that as a part of the process. But I do think that I'm going to explore more with sewing and making my own pieces in that way. Other things that I haven't been able to explore yet are more natural dyes. So I've just been dabbling in it a little bit, but collecting things from nature and really using them to create my materials and to create my hues, that's going to be something that I'm going to explore more this summer.
Oh, fantastic. And it sort of somewhat looks like you have watercolor or tie-dye going on in your dress. So I feel like that would be a perfect
It
opportunity
is,
for
yeah.
natural dye. There is a question from Meg about whether you think of your art as the clothing you create, the person wearing the clothing, walking through space, or the photograph.
Wow, another great question because I don't know. No, this is something that I think about a lot for myself. I've been working on my archive and just really, going through all of my work and deciding what I need to keep and making sure the image is easily accessible and then the piece is stored properly and all of that, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is a huge job. But I really think in my heart that the piece is the photo of when it was worn in the space that it was meant to be in. Now, I definitely consider all of these pieces of art, but for my career and for my work as an artist, I think the photo is actually the one that I think of as the pinnacle of the piece of art. So in an ideal world, if I ever had an exhibition at a museum, I would love to show the piece like on a mannequin or in the space in some way along with the photo.
That's fantastic. There's a request from Candace of whether we could see a close-up of the jacket that's behind you.
Oh,
Is that
yeah, of
possible?
course.
Thank you. A lot of people
So,
think that it would be an amazing exhibition to see your works, especially
oh,
alongside the pieces that maybe inspire them as well, just to show that that conversation.
oh, that's absolutely a dream of mine. So hopefully one day. I'm getting my archive together so that it will be more possible to do it. So hopefully it will happen.
How fantastic.
So yeah, here you can see, I hope you can see some of the detail here. This was a really fun piece to paint because it's super gestural. And I also, you can probably tell I really like this color palette. There's a lot of like yellow, green. Those are sort of my favorite colors. And, being inspired by nature, that will happen. And then you haven't gotten to see, but these are my tags. So all of my tags are hand sewn and hand cut, actual paintings of mine on canvas that I cut out, and they're all unique.
Oh, wow. So there's another question related to kind of the wearing of your artwork. How do you preserve and keep all of your pieces looking perfect and in good condition?
That's another challenge, especially living in New York where closet space is not as common. So I have a storage unit that's like a temperature controlled little I call it my archive, where I keep all of my pieces. And I've been working on sort of cataloging them better. I know you mentioned from my bio at the beginning that I had over 60 pieces, and I now actually have over 100 pieces that I've
Oh,
created.
wow.
So it's a never ending challenge to kind of keep them all sorted and taken care of. But I also want my pieces to be worn. I loan them out to friends a lot, for events and different things like that. I of course wear them myself. I don't want it to be, so special that it's not something that you want to be experiencing your life while wearing. That's really important to me too. So I try not to take them too seriously.
Great. That's really great. Before we kind of end, I think a really good question to kind of cap our time together is, how would you recommend someone get started if they're interested in doing this type of art, especially maybe if they're a kid or if they're a teenager and don't have access to every art supply possible?
Absolutely. So I teach classes. I actually just did my first in-person class in quite a long time this week, and it was so wonderful to connect with people again and share art and see the amazing things that they're creating. So I really enjoy that. So I do that regularly for people who are interested in having a more hands-on experience with this type of work. But for someone who can't make it to a class or just wants to try it out on their own, I definitely recommend starting with something simple like a t-shirt, a tote bag, or a pouch or something that is a nice thick cotton. You don't want anything too sheer or transparent. You can even use an old white t-shirt that you have. It doesn't matter if it's been washed, but light colors are best to start. And then I would recommend just using acrylic paint unless you really are working on a masterpiece that is going to be something that you really want to hold on to for a long time. I would just play around with acrylic first and sort of see how you feel about painting with it. You can also mix it heavily with water to sort of achieve an effect like this that's a little bit more like a tie-dye or a color field kind of look. But I really recommend, if you can, to get a textile medium, because you can really use any type of acrylic paint. It doesn't matter if it's the most basic student grade up to the nicest one that you can buy. Just having that textile medium mixed with it will make it so that your pieces will last and last and you can wash them.
Oh, that's so fantastic. There are a few people who are offering their wedding dresses and wedding suits. So maybe now is a good time to ask you how we can keep in touch with you and how viewers can reach out to you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to connect with all of you. I hope that we can all stay in touch. And please let me know if you have other questions that I can answer directly. But the best way to get in touch with me is on my Instagram. It's at Artfully Aware. I share a lot of behind the scenes of, the latest things that I'm working on. And I love receiving messages there. So definitely hit me up. You can also email me. I have my email address here on the screen, which is my name, ariel.m.adkins@gmail.com. And again, I would absolutely love to hear from you, especially if you have any ideas or questions. I'm all ears.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to see what you have in store for us and what you'll create next. I encourage everyone who's on this chat, if they're interested, to go ahead and send Ariel an email or reach out to her social media. She has some wonderful, wonderful photos on Instagram. So if you're an Instagrammer, go ahead and check her out there. And just to conclude our session today, this is Community Day Art Extravaganza. It's presented by the Horizon Foundation for New Jersey. We hope that you enjoyed today's program and will consider supporting the museum by making a donation or by becoming a member. We do sessions like this, both for members and for the public throughout the year. So check out the chat for links to get involved. And if you feel inspired and excited by hearing from Ariel today, please don't miss our next video drop. It's at 4 p.m. with Makeup by Marissa. You can watch as she creates an illusion look on her face that will leave you seeing triple. And you can find more information in the chat, in the comments below, and on our Facebook page. So we're so excited for you to end our community day with us today with a mural tour, of the Brick City. So don't miss our virtual walking tour with Have You Met Newark. So go grab a free ticket in the chat below, and we hope to see you there. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.